Tyler grew up alongside several gorillas, forming a unique and deep bond with one in particular. However, when the time came for her to leave, she believed he would eventually forget about her. Over the years, she was advised to avoid meeting him again, but what happened when they finally crossed paths was nothing short of remarkable. Tyler, her father Damien, and her companion Asher were determined to reconnect with the animals they had loved so dearly in the past. They traveled by boat, excitement growing as they spotted the gorillas near the shore. Despite their eagerness to approach, they had been warned to maintain a safe distance. These gorillas had adapted to life in the wild and might not welcome human interaction. Tyler, however, couldn't accept this advice. Deep down, she hoped that the gorillas would remember her just as fondly as she remembered them. To her, they were family, or at least they once had been. Now, these animals had established families of their own in the wild, free from any connection to captivity. Everyone cautioned that getting too close could be dangerous. But Tyler's heart told her otherwise, and she was determined to follow it, no matter the risks. As they navigated the river, they began to notice movement among the bushes. Gorillas were peeking out, watching their every move. Among the group, Tyler's eyes immediately locked onto a familiar face. Despite the years and changes, she recognized him without hesitation. It was the gorilla she had raised, Jaden. As the boat came to a halt, Tyler ignored the warnings of her father and the guides, leaping ashore without a second thought. Jaden moved closer. Once a tiny infant she had cradled in her arms, he was now a towering, powerful adult gorilla. Rising onto his hind legs, he made his way straight toward her. No one could intervene. There was no stopping what was about to unfold. If things went wrong, Tyler would have to face the consequences alone. Jaden reached out and grabbed her arm with his massive hand. Her father instinctively wanted to rush to her aid, but he knew that doing so might only escalate the tension. Was this how their story would end? Tyler, who had devoted her life to loving and protecting gorillas, now found herself in a moment of uncertainty. Could her childhood companion really harm her? The thought was unimaginable, but the situation seemed to suggest otherwise. Was the bond they once shared truly broken? The remarkable connection between Tyler and Jaden began years earlier, rooted in her father Damien's life's work, rescuing and protecting animals. As part of this mission, Damon founded the Asher Foundation, an organization dedicated to saving wildlife, especially gorillas, and rehabilitating them for life in the wild. For those animals unable to return to their natural habitats, the Howlett Zoo in Canterbury became a sanctuary. This unique upbringing shaped Tyler's childhood in extraordinary ways. From a young age, she and her siblings grew up immersed in the zoo's vibrant environment, forming bonds with its inhabitants. When Tyler was just over a year old, Baxter, another gorilla, arrived at the zoo. He had been gravely injured and his family had fallen victim to poachers. In desperate need of care, Baxter became a part of their lives. Damon and his team took him under their wing, and soon Baxter was more than just a rescued animal. He was part of the family. Tyler and her siblings treated him as one of their own, playing and growing up alongside him. It was a childhood most could only dream of, filled with moments of wonder and connection with the animal world. As Tyler grew up, her days were often spent inside the gorilla enclosure, ensuring that Baxter never felt lonely. Having a gorilla as a playmate was an incredible experience, full of laughter and joy. But life was about to get even more exciting. One day, when her father, Damien, picked her up from school, he teased her with news of a big surprise waiting at home. And it truly was a surprise, a new family member in the form of a baby gorilla. Jaden was an orphan, too young to survive in the wild on his own after his mother was tragically killed. Jaden was just a tiny infant in desperate need of care and affection. Simply placing him in a zoo enclosure wouldn't suffice. Gorillas are highly social creatures, and he needed the warmth of a family environment to thrive. Now that Tyler was older, she could take on the responsibility of helping care for him. She took it upon herself to make sure he was well fed and comforted him when he felt scared or unsure. Over time, she became a key part of his upbringing, playing the role of a loving sibling. But unlike a human brother, Jaden grew incredibly fast. Before long, he was far too large to live in their home. The time had come for Jaden to move to the zoo, but Damon ensured he wouldn't be alone. Waiting for him in the enclosure was none other than Baxter. Introducing Jaden to Baxter wasn't without its risks. Baxter was much larger and stronger, and if he rejected the younger gorilla, the encounter could turn dangerous. To ease the transition, the two were first allowed to meet through a gated barrier. Almost immediately, they showed curiosity and affection, touching each other's faces and trying to interact playfully. To everyone's relief, Baxter exhibited remarkable gentleness. The introduction went so well that the experts soon felt confident allowing the two to be together. The result was heartwarming. They became instant friends, forming a bond that grew stronger with time. Their connection didn't just include each other. Both gorillas still adored Tyler. Before long, she was allowed to join them in the enclosure, and the trio spent countless hours playing together. Baxter and Jaden never showed any signs of jealousy and were always affectionate toward her. However, convincing others of the safety of their bond wasn't as easy. For Tyler, entering the gorilla enclosure was second nature. It was simply part of her life. So, when a photography team visited the zoo, she didn't think twice about continuing her usual interactions with the gorillas. The photographers likely expected the world to marvel at this extraordinary friendship, but the public reaction wasn't what they had hoped for. Apologies for the brief interruption. Before we proceed with the story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us. Thank you. Now back to the story. The public was outraged when they found out that Tyler and other children were allowed to interact with the gorillas without any protective measures. The backlash was so severe that the zoo received an ultimatum. If they didn't enforce proper safety protocols, they would be shut down. This led to a sudden and painful change for Tyler. She was no longer allowed to have direct contact with her beloved gorilla friends, Jaden and Baxter. Instead of playing together, she could only see them through the glass of their enclosure. Although Tyler was old enough to understand that this rule didn't come from her father, she was still too young to grasp the public's concerns about her safety. The gorillas didn't understand the change either. They missed their friend and became sad when they were told they couldn't be close to her anymore. The separation was heartbreaking for everyone involved. Every day after school, Tyler would rush to the zoo. She'd sit on the step by the glass, and as soon as Jaden and Baxter saw her, they would hurry over, only to be stopped by the invisible barrier. Jaden would let out a soft moan, and Tyler would press her hand against the glass. Jaden would mirror her gesture, placing his hand on the exact spot from his side, yearning to touch her. It was a touching yet sorrowful sight. However, Tyler's safety wasn't the only reason her interactions with the gorillas were being limited. The zoo had to prepare the animals for a future in the wild. By this time, Jaden and Baxter were mature and strong enough to return to their natural habitat. To get them ready for this transition, the humans began reducing all forms of contact. While the gorillas were gentle and playful in the zoo, they needed to adapt to the challenges of surviving in the wilderness. This difficult but necessary process marked the beginning of their journey back to their true home. Several months had passed, and finally, the training necessary for the gorillas to thrive in the wild was completed. Damon and his team had been dedicated to preparing them ever since they arrived. The main goal of their foundation was to rescue these animals and, if feasible, reintroduce them to their natural habitat, which was now becoming a reality. Despite Tyler's mixed emotions, The months of preparation culminated in their readiness to return to Gabon. They had identified a sanctuary where the guerrillas could live safely yet freely. This departure marked potentially the last time Tyler and her family would see them for years to come. Tyler embraced Jaden and Baxter one last time before they were sedated to ease their travel. The guerrillas, clearly eager, pressed their heads against hers, savoring the embrace for as long as possible. The bond she shared with them was deep, yet it was about to be stretched across continents. Tyler watched as the guerrillas were secured in crates and loaded onto a truck, marking the initial leg of their trek back to Africa. This was the culmination of all their efforts. Their shared dream was for the guerrillas to live in freedom. However, for Tyler, the farewell was tinged with sadness. It was akin to parting ways with family members she might never encounter again. As time passed, Diamond visited Africa once to check on them and returned with uplifting news. The guerrillas were flourishing. The pair had integrated into a troop and were living exactly as nature intended. Witnessing them in their natural environment, mingling with other guerrillas, confirmed that their efforts and the emotional farewells were ultimately worthwhile. Though they were now rooted in Africa, far from their previous lives, Tyler and Damon hadn't forgotten their past. Tyler often thought back to the friends of her youth. Over a decade had passed since they had reintegrated into the wild, gradually becoming wary of human presence and preferring solitude. Consequently, it was advised that Tyler refrain from attempting to reconnect with them. As time went on, Tyler pursued a career similar to her father's, dedicating herself to the same wildlife foundation and participating in various animal rescue missions. When Damon experienced a health scare, their lives shifted direction. After his recovery, he was determined to return to Africa, drawn back to the place he held dear. They planned not only to revisit the landscape, but also to seek out the guerrillas. The thought of reuniting with Jaden, Baxter and the rest was intimidating, especially considering Damien's age. Recognizing the urgency, he knew he might not have another chance. Tyler, upon hearing of the plans, insisted on accompanying him. She yearned to see how Jaden, whom she had cared for, had adapted to the wild. Despite warnings from others who believed the guerrillas would no longer recognize her and that such a reunion could spoil her cherished memories, Tyler was adamant. She refused to let her father make the trip alone and was determined to witness the encounter firsthand. Damon alone supported her decision, understanding her desire to see the guerrillas again, whatever the outcome might be. Their journey began swiftly. Initially they flew to Gabon, yet the dense forest where the guerrillas resided was inaccessible by road or air. To reach their destination, they traveled off-road until they arrived at a base camp, where they planned to stay for several days. This setup allowed them the flexibility to attempt locating Yalta's family multiple times if necessary. The path into the forest wasn't simple. Instead of hiking, they navigated the river by a small boat to approach the area discreetly. On the morning they set out, the sanctuary guides briefed them sternly. They emphasized that direct contact with the guerrillas was not permitted right away. Observing from a distance, the guides would decide the right moment to approach based on the guerrillas' demeanor. Touching or interacting with the guerrillas was strictly forbidden, as despite previous acquaintance, Jaden and Baxter were now wild animals and potentially dangerous. The first day of their search was startling. As they glided along the river, Tyler and Damon noticed several faces emerging from the tree line. The guerrillas were as intrigued by the newcomers as they were by them. Tyler gasped in recognition. The guerrillas she once knew were observing them closely. Though they had visibly changed, she identified Jaden and Baxter immediately. The proximity was overwhelming, and her emotions surged. When Jaden reached out and touched her with his strong hands, she felt an instinctive fear, not joy. Her legs trembled, nearly collapsing under her, but as she gazed into Jaden's eyes, she sensed a spark of recognition. He pressed his forehead to hers, echoing their farewell years ago. She instinctively stroked his head as she used to when he was a frightened youngster. Jaden responded by gently caressing her arms and keeping his head pressed against hers, a silent greeting in their unexpected reunion. Then Baxter approached as well. Recognizing his old friend much like Jaden did, it was evident they all had transformed over the years, yet there remained a connection. Baxter tenderly traced his finger down Tyler's face, rekindling memories of past times. Damon drew near, and the gorillas, lively and playful, clambered onto him, tumbling around with ease. It seemed they intuitively knew to be more gentle with Tyler. Their gorilla family cautiously joined in, lingering on the fringes of the group. While Tyler and her father admired the gorillas in their natural setting, Jaden and Baxter seemed intent on spending every moment with the humans who had once been their closest kin. The guides watched in astonishment, not expecting the gorillas to so readily display their affection for humans. It was evident they had missed these interactions. While they were glad to reconnect with Damon, their engagement with Tyler spoke volumes of deep affection. As it came time to depart, the gorillas vocalized their soft protests, pained at the thought of separation once more. The scene was profoundly moving. Fortuitously, they had another day with the gorillas. As farewells loomed, Tyler understood it might be the final goodbye. There was no certainty of returning. The gorillas seemed to share her sorrow, reluctant to release their grip. Baxter embraced her repeatedly, his hold gentle but reluctant. Tyler, tears streaming, gently extricated herself from his embrace. Facing Jaden, her first charge, she felt an overwhelming love. He nestled his head against her chest, and she kissed his forehead, whispering her love. As she boarded the boat, the gorilla's gaze followed. Tyler cherished this moment, grateful for disregarding the discouragements against the journey. It was an irreplaceable encounter, affirming a lasting bond, despite years and distances. These gorillas were where they should be, and so was Tyler, ready to return home and continue her mission of saving more animals. This profound connection, tested by time and distance, proved unbreakable, leaving her with memories she would treasure forever. Did you like this tale? Would you consider reconnecting with a wild animal that you befriended during your childhood after a long time? Do you believe that animals can recall their initial caregivers? Share your thoughts in the comments section. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. What an incredible demonstration of friendship across species. Thank you for tuning in. We'll catch up in the upcoming video. Have an amazing day.